The Year of the Plague 2020. I am Hugh Hewitt. This is the rundown, a weekend of extraordinary events, the most lasting of which is the embrace by the Democratic Party in the United States of the slogan and the agenda, defund the police. This is my rundown for the morning. It is my rundown at the start of a week that will change American politics, I think, decisively. It's already happened. When the Democratic Party put their arms around defund the police, 75% of America, at least, said, what? Maybe it's 85%. It might be 95% of America said, are you out of your minds? Defund the police? We love the police. Understand that in the United States of America, we love the police. Do not take that as an exoneration of the murder of George Floyd. It isn't. Do not take that as a turning a blind eye to a bad cop here or there. But take that as the 95% of Americans that pick up, dial 911, and know that they need the police to come. How many times have you called the police? How many times? I was thinking to myself over the weekend, probably a half dozen times, every time, because of a car crash. Not one that I've been involved in, but having seen one, I can remember quite clearly, a car crash where I immediately stopped, called the police. Because I was in the other lane going the other way and said, oh my gosh. And 911, police have got to get to X. And you know that if, God forbid, it's summer, the school's out, there will not be a school shooting. But the next time there is a mass shooting in America, and there is always going to be a next time in America, it is a sad fact of the witch's brew in which our children have been educated and the collapse of the basic fiber of understanding of good and evil and of why every human being has dignity, that we will have some idiot, some crazed moron with a weapon go on a rampage. They're not going to call demonstrators to come to the scene. They're going to call the police, and the police will be there. So to every officers out there listening, thank you this morning. The number one story of the morning, Washington Post. Derek Hawkins, Katie Mettler, Perry Stein. This is the rundown. Defund the police gains traction as cities seek to respond to demands for a major law enforcement shift. I do not believe it gained traction. I believe that the radicals who are in favor of that represent a tiny minority, but the Democratic Party is driven by a tiny minority. And if you vote for Joe Biden this fall, you're voting for defund the police. It is that simple. From the Wall Street Journal, protests sparked by George Floyd fuel moves to defund police. That is, again, Wall Street Journal. This is not being made up. The largest protests sparked by the killing of George Floyd remain mostly peaceful across the U.S. this weekend, as emboldened organizers say they didn't plan to stop rallying until they saw concrete changes in police policy. That means disbanding the police party. Most vocally heard in Minneapolis, where the mayor was hooted out of a crowd because he was reluctant. He gave himself the classic, it was right out of Darkness at Noon, confession of being a bad man. But he wouldn't say defund the police because he knows that's nuts. It is nuts, right? It's nuts. The Democratic Party has allied itself with a absolutely crazy demand to defund the police. Third story of the morning, California and some other states see the coronavirus cases rise. Well, guess what? That's going to be a headline that keeps going on as we have abandoned public health. Where were the public health sentinels this weekend? I myself wrote a column for the Washington Post 4 weeks ago urging people to please put on the mask when they bicycled, urging people to please observe social distancing. I was apart from my wife for 8 weeks because we were playing by the rules until she could finally fly and join me. Apart from my family for 8 weeks because we observed the rules. And many people had horrible, horrible circumstances. They lost family members. They could not grieve. They could not bury them. They could not visit sick ones, elderly ones. Heartbreaking stories. Since March 16th, 15th, something like that. And then we look up, and this weekend, I guess a total, I saw the number 600,000 people demonstrate. It was far below the numbers that were expected. Don't let anyone tell you elsewhere. It was far below the numbers. There was one big crowd shot in Philadelphia because Broad Street is narrow. That was like the Philadelphia Bond March of 1918, which led to an explosion of the Spanish flu in that city. Luckily for us, these marches, God bless their First Amendment rights, were nonviolent, and luckily for us, they're occurring at the beginning of summer, not officially, but we are in summer, and not at the beginning of fall like the Philadelphia Bond March in 1918, because that led to explosion of the Spanish flu, and it killed tens of thousands of people. One epidemiologist at work yesterday estimates every day of the protest means between 200 and 1,000 new deaths. That's quite a range, but he's trying to communicate to you that the marches were a public health catastrophe. They were. But they were deemed important enough by public health officials that they would hide from standing up to the demonstrators and telling them this is an insane act of self-immolation for everyone involved. So the Wall Street Journal reports California and some other states see coronavirus cases rise. Expect that for many days to continue. Protests, according to the Financial Times, in a pandemic present dilemma for scientists. You think? Coronavirus good news, though, is the fifth story of the morning in the rundown. Hugh Hewitt always looks for good news, friends. I do. And when you look for the rundown every morning at YouTube, if you miss the opening part of the show, because you get up a little bit later than 6 a.m. in the morning or whatever time you get up, head over to YouTube to the Hugh Hewitt channel, and you'll find the rundown. You'll know what matters the most. Coronavirus good news. A new study finds that the novel coronavirus has become less lethal over the past few months. While there's no evidence that mutations are making the virus less deadly, treatments have become enormously better as scientists have learned more. That is great news. What's not even significant news? General Powell endorsed Biden. So what? I endorse Trump. So what? Everybody's going to vote in the United States. General Powell voted for President Obama twice. He endorsed Secretary Hilton. He endorsed Secretary Clinton. He is a Democrat now. He's a much respected former statesman soldier. But his vote is my vote. We cancel each other out. All right. Trump is going to get all the red states he got before, with the possible exception of Michigan. He might lose Arizona. I think he's going to win Wisconsin. I think he's locking up Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania, God love them, though they're Steelers fans and the literacy level is a little bit questionable, they are not nuts to fund the police. John Bolton plans to publish a tell-all. That is the end of John's career with conservatives. If it's true. I don't believe it's true. I believe it will end up being a book about China. I know the ambassador pretty well. He's not a tell-all kind of guy. The Washington Post, Josh Dawsey, Tom Hamburger reporting he plans to publish a tell-all about his time in the White House. The Room Where It Happens, a White House memoir on June 23rd. I look forward to reading it. I doubt very much it will be what they expect it will be. My favorite headline of the morning. Senator Tom Cotton's next mission, carrying Trump banner after Trump. I sent Tom Cotton a note yesterday. I said, is it your plan to destroy CNN this week, having destroyed the New York Times last week? The New York Times is a laughingstock. The New York Times is a laughingstock. Their editor, James Bennett, forced to walk a walk of shame out of the building, editor of their op-ed page, because he published a fine op-ed speaking on behalf of 75% of Americans, or 80%, that as a last resort, military troops would be used in the case of civil insurrection as they were in 1992 in Los Angeles. Tom Cotton has destroyed the New York Times. They are a joke. It's just a joke. That newspaper is a joke. So the Wall Street Journal asks, carrying Trump banner after Trump. Senator Tom Cotton has become a long-time advisor to President Trump, it begins, both echoing the chief executive bare-knuckled rhetoric on subjects like immigration and China, at times pushing him to take even more aggressive position. My only question is it going to be Tom Cotton or Mike Pompeo who runs against Mike Pence in 2024? Our friend Representative Gallagher is in the Wall Street Journal this morning with an op-ed. Yes, America is in a Cold War with China. And Germany is upset with us to close off the rundown, both in the Financial Times and in the Wall Street Journal, because President Trump is pulling troops out of there. Well, don't build a pipeline to Russia, Germany. Don't act like you're Russia's friend and not ours. Begin to be an ally and up your defense budget, and that won't happen. In the meantime, good on President Trump. I'll be back with the markets and what's going on financially. It's going to be another good day, I believe, as the reopening rally continues. I am Hugh Hewitt. That was the rundown. Stay tuned.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. A chilling headline ran over Easter weekend from CNN. Louisville police officers to record license plate numbers of Easter weekend churchgoers. Over the course of this pandemic, I've argued that churches should follow generally applicable shelter-in-place orders, that these orders and guidelines do not violate religious liberty. Indeed, we ought to comply with them out of love of neighbor. But if policies single out churches and religious groups, it becomes an entirely different issue, an unconstitutional violation of religious liberty. Over the course of the last several weeks, some government officials have crossed the line. In the case of Louisville, it took a restraining order from United States District Court Judge Justin Walker to curtail Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher's attempt to prevent even drive-in church gatherings. The judge said, quote, "The mayor's decision is stunning, and it is beyond all reason unconstitutional. Consider this. In America, in 2020, comes the threat that they're taking names and they're taking numbers. It's extremely important that all American Christians take note, and in a hurry." I'm Albert Mohler.
ADF, fighting for those whose religious freedom is being violated. We know this is only temporary. We know it can't go on like this forever. We have to keep focusing on the future and get through this thing day by day. But when it ends, the sun will come out. Jobs will start up again. The traffic jam we used to hate will come back. Thank God for cars. So many things we took for granted are going to be so special. We'll get through this because we have each other. And we have this radio station. We are the answer. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
How can these people out there in the streets not know, according to the CDC, that police killings of blacks have dramatically declined over the last 45 years by almost 75%? How can you not know that? How can you not know of a peer-reviewed study in a publication put out by the National Association of Sciences in which every single police shooting in the year 2015 was examined, and they could not find any evidence whatsoever of disproportionate deadly force used against blacks? And then, of course, there's a smaller study by the Harvard economist I told you about. Not only did he not find that they used disproportionate deadly force against blacks, but that they were more hesitant, more reluctant to use deadly force against blacks than against whites. More whites are murdered by blacks than blacks are murdered by whites. How can you not know that? Now, again, as I said many times, most murder is same-race murder. But to the extent that there are interracial black-white homicides every year, about 750, how can you not know that blacks kill 500 whites, even though blacks are 13% of the population, and whites kill 250 blacks, even though they're around 61% of the population? How can you not know that? And you're out in the streets making all these assertions. What you're doing is making things worse. You're creating an image of the police department that's going to make people not want to join it, and you're causing the so-called Ferguson effect.
This coming November, you'll have a chance to make a difference. If you vote, you can save this country from the crazies on the left. You know, the ones that want to ruin the economy, turn America into a socialist utopia. Like that'll never work. But it all starts with one simple act. Make sure you're registered to vote. If you aren't, you're part of the problem. If you vote and you make smart decisions, you'll do more than just make a difference. You'll save the country. We are the answer.
22 minutes after the hour, America. I really believe this. My whole life has been witness. Keep playing it, Adam. That in America, progress is real. My whole life. Born in 1956, the best year ever to be born. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt's birthday was yesterday. We celebrated with my daughter and grandkids down in way south of Virginia. It took a long time. My back is killing me because I love the commute. But I was reflecting. Our 64 years on this planet are the best 64 years to have been alive in the best place in the world to be alive. And things will get better. And the demonstrations yesterday, a lot of people were marching, including Mitt Romney, in the hopes that things will get better racially. And I believe they have been and they will continue to be. I remember 1968. This was not 1968. This was, one person described it seems like a large block party in Washington, D.C. Yes, there are some angry extremists, but they are not asking to defund the police in any great number. The Democratic Party has decided they're going to embrace defund the police. The Minneapolis City Council has voted they're going to do it, but that is not what's going on in America. In fact, the reopening of America is an astonishing thing. That jobs report, though not quite as good as we thought it was, there is a statistical error that makes it look a little bit greater news than it was, but it was still great news. People were expecting it would go up to 20%. It fell. And it fell a little bit less than the actual report said because of a categorization, one of their statistical things over at the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, has nothing to do with politics. But as I look at markets this morning, I can see that, and this is brought to you by Birch Gold. They are the gold people. You can get to the gold people by going to hughgold.com. Texting my name to 474747 is the easiest way to get all the information you need to know about buying gold. 474747. Do not wait for another catastrophe. They come along and gold then reaches higher and higher. When I first started to tell you last year about it, it was at $1,400 an ounce. It's at almost $1,700 today. It's dropped a little bit over the weekend. Look, gold is impossible to predict, but the bottom never falls out of it. That's why some of your portfolio ought to be there against destruction, fire, and fury, meteor strikes. Anything like that. You never know what's going to happen next in this country. Gold is always there, and Birch Gold stores it in a physical location for you, and they will help you do the paperwork to transfer part of your retirement funds, your IRA, your 401k, into a physically present gold and silver IRA. You can go to hughgold.com or just text my name to 474747. Here's the best news of the morning. The 10-year treasury is at 0.9%. That's great. Still going to mean the lowest mortgage rates in history, but 0.9% and gold at 1,700 means markets have stabilized. When we get, they're starting to show normalcy. On Friday, the Dow Jones went up 829 points. The NASDAQ went up almost 200 points. The S&P went up 81 points. Overnight, Japan went up 1.37%. England is open and it's up. Hong Kong even finished a little bit in the green this morning. We don't know what will happen today. I never predict 4 p.m. before 4 p.m., but I'm an optimist that I went to a restaurant with the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt for the first time since we were in Hawaii in March for our vacation. First time on Saturday night. America is reopening. And I counted the number of servers and waiters and cooks, and things were a little bit slow. Please be patient with everyone as they figure out they dust the cobwebs off and America reopens in the restaurant industry. Everybody wore masks except the diners. It's wonderful. It's working. But that does mean, and I will explain it later in the show, inflation is coming. Gold is where you want to be. 474747. Text my name, Hugh, to that, and Birch Gold will be back to her. Visit hughgold.com. I'll be right back, America, on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Heritage Foundation.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
We've been told for at least 6 weeks now that the only way that we can come out of this in any semblance of getting back to normal is this V-shaped recovery. We had this precipitous voluntary drop because we, as you said, we literally shut down the most powerful economy in the world. And as a result, what we need to see is a concordant and analogous, very, very steep recovery. Don't the figures today indicate that V-shaped recovery, you're the expert, Trish, that V-shaped recovery is in fact possible?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the glimmer of hope, right? That we have right now. And let me tell you, if you can pull that off, Seb, you give people that economic security again, and wow, I mean, he will be applauded for that. If you have the economic security and the physical security, because don't forget,
Yes.
like this is what we're dealing with right now too. You don't have that physical security. If you can give those two things to people, I mean, I think that really affects the middle of the road voter. They want to feel economically and physically secure. So today was a huge win for the president, but more importantly, this is a huge win for America, for every single one of us.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
33 minutes after the hour, America, on this Monday, June 8th. I am Hugh Hewitt. Mike Allen joins me from Axios, Axios.com. His newsletter, Axios AM, is a must-read every morning. Good morning, Mike. Where did you spend your weekend? Michael's gone as usual. Mike? I bet you his phone's on.
Arlington, Virginia is reopened. Walking around here, walked across the bridge into Georgetown, into downtown, where so many people streaming into D.C. near the White House, lots of families, lots of people with their kids. Very inspiring weekend and all calm. A week ago, Friday night, Saturday night, so brutal for D.C. and the signs of that are still here. All of Georgetown, all of downtown boarded up. Even stores that are open, they're boarded up, and they just open up their boarded up door.
Yeah, I believe now the violence is behind us. I believe the demonstrations might continue. I think we are in for a surge of coronavirus in D.C., as has happened in California. But yesterday, one observer of the protest said it's like a giant block party. It was not an angry crowd. And I thought that is generally true across the United States, as far as I can tell from the coverage. Agree or disagree, Mike Allen?
No, that's true, both from the coverage and from my real-life observation, and the numbers, the passion, the signs around the world. So fascinating that not just in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, but you see real pushes for real change in other countries. In the UK, a push for change in Axios AM this morning. We have one of the remarkable symbols of this moment that we're in, like a once-in-a-century moment in Bristol, England, statue of a slave trader that stood for 195 years and toppled off its pedestals to great cheers from the crowd, and then hauled into a harbor where he had once imported Africans as part of his business, and his statue hefted headfirst into the drink.
And what's remarkable to me about that story is that it had been there for 195 years. Britain was the first to end the slave trade and imposed its abolition on the world. I do not know how that happened, but I was grieved, as was Home Secretary Patel, that Winston Churchill was defaced in Great Britain yesterday. Winston Churchill, who saved the world from fascism, who was the greatest man of the last century and maybe the millennium. Some would argue Martin Luther, but I just can't imagine most of Britain agreeing with that. I want to go to the second element of this morning's Axios AM newsletter, Mike, because I began the Hugh Hewitt rundown, which I do every show, by noting that defund police became the de facto platform of the Democratic Party yesterday. Defund the police is nuts. Now, you objectively report that Mayor Jacob Fry is shouted out of a demonstration after he refused it. But the context, as you quote, Black Lives Matter co-founder Alicia Garza told Meet the Press that defund the police aren't about eliminating police department, but about reinvesting funds towards the resources that our communities need. I'm sorry, Mike, that's not the message America got yesterday. Defund the police means defund the police. Take money away from the police. I think that Joe Biden's worst day of the year was yesterday because of defund the police. Your comments?
Well, there's three rather significant Democrats in America. One of them is named Joe Biden. One of them is named Speaker Pelosi. One of them is named Leader Chuck Schumer, and they're talking about police reform. And Democrats this week unveiling their sweeping police reform bill. That's very different, and that's different than what you've been hearing over the weekend. And they're the ones who can make things happen at the national level. And Joe Biden, of course, can drive a conversation throughout the party. But you're right. Like this, there's a disconnect between what activists want, what their leaders want, and that's always hard to navigate. in allowed emotional time.
Yeah, the collapse of the media in America yesterday was complete. I essayed about this in the Washington Post yesterday, Media Heal Thyself, because when the demand is made to defund the police, the obligation becomes, in every setting where there's anyone saying, I am Joe Biden, I am Nancy Pelosi, I am Chuck Schumer, or I am supporting them like General Powell, the immediate question should be, do you support defund the police? Because they're going to say blah, 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 and they're going to try and hedge because they know it's an insane proposition. But they should be pressed by the media, but because the media is left-wing overwhelmingly, Mike Allen, as I argued in the Post yesterday, and it will post shortly at the Post on the landing page, the media is all occupied territory, and they don't push that question.
Hugh, I am going to push back.
Go right ahead. I'm happy. Go ahead.
So Axios is among the news organizations that take a clinical approach to the news. We don't love on people. We don't hate on people. Like, we bring a clear eye to the news. And Hugh, if you read Jonathan Swan, if you read Dionne Rabowen, if you read Amy, if you read Amy Harder, if you read our coverage with a fair eye, you will agree that is true.
Now, I read Axios every day, Mike, but I do not read in number 2, defund the police gains momentum. I do not read a quote from Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer being asked the question directly. I don't read anywhere the Democrats having to carry the burden of this insane proposition forward into the fall, which they will be obliged to do by me and by everybody else. They own it. And every single person who's ever called 911 is thinking to themselves, that's crazy. The mayor of D.C. planted Black Lives Matter on the street, which is fine. Then she added equals defund the police, which is not. And so it is a proposition of the Democratic Party and their elites that they have to answer. And if Republicans had said that, every one of them would have been asked to defend it. So Axios did not ask anyone to defend it. So that is a swing and a miss on Axios's part, Mike. And you know I love you. It's just you folks do not press Democrats with the hardest questions. The floor is yours.
Two things about that. One, the Biden campaign has been asked about that. You're right that they're going to have to answer it. We're going to have Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer out today talking about police reform, which is different. And you pointed out the comments by Black Lives Matter co-founder Alicia Garza, pointing out that the real message here is more resources that communities need, not necessarily literally defending police. And you remember defund ICE, which you relished and savored as well. You should. That's faded as other proposals came in. This is having its day, but very quickly this conversation will be driven by Democrats with power, who include Biden, Pelosi, and Schumer. And for sure, they need to acknowledge this movement, lead this movement. You and I have talked about how genuine and how fervent this push for change is. It's global now. And I think everybody in the country recognizes for sure we need big changes. You ask anyone of any age who's out on the streets of the country, and they will say what's being done now isn't working.
Now, Mike Allen, I spoke with Pastor Mark Whitlock of Reed Temple, Maryland, the largest AME church in the world, on Thursday. I agree with everything you said. That is not responsive to the question of whether or not American media holds the Democratic Party to the same standard that it holds the Republican Party and pushes them as hard as it pushes the Republicans to answer difficult questions. Jake Tapper, for example, is your friend. I can't really call him a friend, but he's my old colleague from the debate days. And Jake had Colin Powell on yesterday. Colin Powell declared for Joe Biden, and he said the president is drifting away from the Constitution. The obvious follow-up at that point is, Colin Powell, do you defend defunding the police? Colin Powell, do you defend abolishing the Electoral College? Colin Powell, do you defend making sure that Electoral College voters do not follow their states but follow the popular vote? Do you defend abolishing the Senate? Do you defend all of the anti-constitutional propositions that the Democratic Party has put forward, because if his argument is, I can't support Donald Trump because he's drifting away from the Constitution. In fact, Trump is the president who's been defending the Constitution. The Democrats are the one who want to fundamentally change it. And that was not asked by Jake. He got a pass. And I think on my side of the aisle, getting a pass, we've had it with having people get passes.
So this is very instructive because what we see now that you're a single issue voter, and we see that this issue is going to be a way for Republicans who may be unhappy with the president. You've been tough on the president at times. The president is pushing this issue, and this is something that Republicans can agree on and will continue to push. So the way that you're talking about it is for sure illuminating.
Well, what do you mean by illuminating?
It's the sign of where Republican conversation is going, where Republicans want to take the conversation, where you think safe ground is in hard times. At a time when you saw on Meet the Press yesterday, Morning Joe this morning, you see the big graphic NBC Wall Street Journal poll, very respected, showing that 80% of Americans, 80%, think that things are generally out of control. An astonishing poll figure on any question.
Well, I agree with that. I thought things were out of control last week. I think they're back in control this week. But Mike, I'm actually humbled that you consider me to be a influencer and an opinion leader. I don't think I am on this position. I believe it is inherent. It is ingrained in the American people to support the police and to want them to be better. But to fund the police, I think it was instantaneously recognized by people as a radical point of view that not one Democrat,
a different way to say it.
But let me ask you a question. Did one Democrat denounce to fund the police this weekend, to your knowledge? One?
I don't know the answer to that, Hugh, but I will say that you're right that the police are close to home. That ICE, for a lot of people, is abstract or distant.
Yes.
But everybody knows they're police.
And everybody has a cop for a friend, and the idea that they are the enemy. Well, Mike Allen, we'll continue the conversation next week. Make sure you read Axios AM every single weekend, because Mike and I get into it occasionally, but we always do so as friends. Let me now tell you about what I need a lot of, ReliefFactor.com. Told you I drove fetching Mrs. Hewitt, and I celebrated her birthday with family. It took 4 hours both ways. Oh, my gosh, my back. My Relief Factor's in my hand. I'm going to go out afterwards, assuming the Beltway is not 100 degrees, and I'll go as far as I can. ReliefFactor.com. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, omega. I take it every single morning at this hour. I remind you 2 more times. Why? Because if you want to stay active, even in summer's heat, I don't know if it's malarial or not outside in D.C. today. I haven't checked. But I'll be out on the byways and the highways running some distance this morning. Sometimes it's asthma, sometimes it's allergy, sometimes it's perfect to run. And I go a long way, dozen miles. Some days I do too. Whatever it is, ReliefFactor.com helps me do that. Come right back for Salena Zito.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Time for the Yinzer Report with my friend Salena Zito. You can read her in the Wall Street Journal. You can read her in the Washington Examiner. I've just posted her latest. Selena's been up next to my hometown. She went to Niles, Ohio, home of the McKinley Memorial, which is next to Warren. I hope you went over to Warren a little bit, Salena, or did you just go to Niles and then retreat back to Yinzerland?
No, I went to Tim Ryan's house and interviewed him there. It's at SelenaZito.com if you guys want to check it out.
Oh, how is Tim doing? You know, the congressman's never had me over for, he probably had kielbasa, did he?
I can't reveal.
Okay, you can't reveal. Probably had a couple of beers with Tim. I know Tim pretty well. But yeah, I am now noting I have never been invited to Casa Ryan, and Salena Zito has been. Salena, I want to get big and important. People should read the McKinley Memorial piece because it's typical Salena Zito, great reporting. But I need to know about the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and Yinzerland and this extraordinary controversy which is broken out with your hometown paper. It saddens me, but what is going on?
Well, from what I understand, it began with a post made by a female black photographer where she, as with Twitter, people can be pithy and snarky, and she posted photos from a Kenny Chesney concert several years ago where there was garbage in the street, in parking lots around Heinz Field. And she, was complaining that this had happened during the protest, and then she said, "Oh no," and I'm paraphrasing here. She says, "Oh no, wait, that was a Kenny Chesney concert." And that didn't go over well with her bosses. And so they pulled her from the coverage. Again, this is all, secondhand. This is what the reporting has been so far. And then it was followed up by no photographers are to be covering any of the protests. So I'm not quite sure what the problem is over there, but they've had a lot of labor unrest at that newspaper, and you have to wonder if this has to do with trying to manipulate the unions from the bosses.
All right, so I want to ask you about police in Pittsburgh. I preface this by saying I've never, ever had a bad encounter with the police, though I may have been pulled over a few times for speeding. I may have. I'm not saying I have or haven't. I've never had a bad encounter with the police. Of course, I'm a white man. And some police have actually recognized me, and they may have on one occasion said, "Well, I'm going to let you go. I love your show." That may have happened on the way to the Reagan debate in 2016. That may have happened. I may have disclosed that. But I remember actually going up, and this is probably the experience in Pittsburgh. The police are always out at the football game, right? And every single time I went, from the time I went first in 1965 to I went to college in 74, my dad and the family stopped and talked to the same officer. He's a black officer in Cleveland. We always stopped and had a hot dog with him. Every single game. It was like a ritual. It was part of the ritual. The police on game day and the fans were one. They did not like the Steelers. They were pulling for the Browns. And I just, as a young boy, of course, kept away from that. 68's in the background. It's on TV. I've just never had other than respect for the police. Is that the experience of white America and not the experience of black America, Salena?
Well, I mean, everyone obviously has a different experience with different, and a lot of that has to do with different places where you are. I mean, I've covered protests. I've covered shootings. So I've been in different kinds of, I've been in the thick of things during the G20 when things got really bad here in Pittsburgh between the protesters and the police. And quite frankly, I was scared. But that has everything to do with things being heightened and not people being profiled. They were trying to keep order, and the protesters wanted to, at that time, cause a little shenanigans. So, I mean, I think, we'll never know the different experiences because neither of us are black. But, I've had some pesky moments with the police officer, but I've never, ever felt as though my life was in danger.
A question, Salena, before we go out. Defund the police. is crazy. It's a radical, crazy demand that Democrats have to live with now because none of them stood up immediately and said, no, that's crazy. They know it's part of the AOC and the squad. Did you see one Democrat ask about defund the police over the weekend, and do they not have to live with it now?
They do have to live with it. Here's a really important point. I'm writing about this today. The most important voting bloc in this election is going to be seniors. And there has been trends that they were moving towards Biden. Well, guess what? Defund the police, that just made them run back over to Trump. It's a bad move for the Democrats.
I hope you spend 4 weeks asking people what they think defund the police means and how it impacts them, because the Democratic Party is committed to defund the police. Not one Democrat stood up over the weekend and said, no, no, no. Not one. That's a nutty, crazy thing. Salena Zito is the opposite of nutty and crazy. Great reporter. Go to salenazito.com for all her work and come right back for hour 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
So here's the headline, and then I want to read to you the first sentence. New York Times, this is the New York Times headline. New York Times says Senator's op-ed did not meet standards. The subtitle, or the subhead, after a staff uproar, the Times says the editing process was rushed. Senator Tom Cotton's Send in the Troops essay is now under review. I don't even know what does that mean, it's under review. It's an opinion piece. Now listen to the first paragraph, which is a sentence. Executives at the New York Times scrambled on Thursday, that's yesterday, to address the concerns of employees and readers who were angered by the newspaper's publication of an opinion essay by a United States senator calling for the federal government to send the military to suppress protests against police violence in American cities. That's a lie. It's pure 100% lie. The article never, ever hinted at calling for the federal government to suppress protest. It was entirely to suppress violence. There's a big difference. It's a lie. They don't even know when they lie. That's the amazing thing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Welcome. I'm talking to my friend Dinesh D'Souza. He has a new book out today. It's called United States of Socialism. Who's behind it, why it's evil, how to stop it. Young people seem always to be the easy marks for this kind of marks, no pun intended, easy marks for this kind of thinking.
That's true. I also think that young people will say the Scandinavian model works, but they don't know what the Scandinavian model is. So the Scandinavian countries, for example, are capitalist in wealth creation. They're socialist in wealth distribution, but they're very careful not to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. And so you have low corporate tax rates, about 20%, same as in America. You have no minimum wage in most Scandinavian countries. They have no wealth tax, no inheritance tax. You can hire and fire people for any reason. Regulations are less than in this country.
Dinesh, I just have to hit pause for a second. Everything you've just said is stunning. I mean, the idea that they have low corporate tax rates, low wealth tax. I mean, you would never dream that in a country that people think of as socialist, that would be the case. Bernie Sanders is not advertising that.
No, and in fact, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren want to impose financial transaction taxes on Wall Street. Now, there's no Scandinavian country that goes near this. The second part of it is they say, look, we can have a generous welfare state, but here's the point. Everybody has to pay for it, not just the rich. We're not going to go after the billionaires. The basic idea is if we have a 50% tax rate and you make $60,000 a year, give us 30. So in other words, they tax the middle class.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
This is a good country. This is a good and decent land. And I believe that with all of my heart. That doesn't mean we can't do a lot better. But it doesn't mean that a sizable percentage of America is bad. Evidently, former Vice President Joe Biden and the Democrat presidential nominee thinks a pretty sizable portion of America is bad. He had a town hall yesterday, another one of these virtual town halls. It feels like every time Biden goes off script, he gets in trouble. Do you believe that up to 15% of Americans are bad people? Is that your view of the nation? If we're going to start categorizing what percentage is good, what percentage is bad, I don't know. That doesn't seem like a winning campaign strategy to me. Here was Joe Biden yesterday. He was with actor Don Cheadle in a virtual town hall.
Do we really think this is as good as we can be as a nation? I don't think the vast majority of people think that. There are probably anywhere from 10 to 15% of the people out there that are just not very good people. But that's not who we are. The vast majority of the people are decent. We have to appeal to that, and we have to unite people, bring them together.
That's a heck of a way to unite, Mr. Biden. That up to 15% of Americans are not very good people. What a unifying message. I guess that goes on a campaign slogan. 15% of Americans are bad. Wow.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I can think of many abuses of authority, but I don't have the time to list them all. From the IRS being used to target conservative Americans because they're conservatives, to the Department of Justice under Obama providing weapons to drug cartels in Mexico under the Fast and Furious operation, to the sale of 20% of our nation's uranium against statute when Hillary Clinton was chairman of the CFIUS committee that had to approve that sale, and her husband had just received $500,000 for one speech from the same Russian company that acquired that uranium. I missed that statement to the Atlantic from you. Oh, or Benghazi, when Americans died because Hillary didn't provide the security requested by Chris Stevens hundreds of times, and then Obama and his lackeys lied about it incessantly on the Sunday morning programs, saying, oh, it's a YouTube thing, and oh, that wasn't Al-Qaeda, it was spontaneous. Where was your statement then, you hack? Oh, and then lastly, executive abuse of power. I missed your statement to the mainstream media when a 3-star general, oh, I know he's not a Marine, but maybe you could care if he's from the Army, after 33 years of service, was targeted for framing an abuse, losing his home, $3 million worth of legal fees. When did you speak out about Mike Flynn, Mad Dog Mattis? You're an affront, not just to the devil dogs of Quantico, but to real Americans who care about real abuses of power. Go to hell, Mad Dog Mattis.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Morning, Glory America. Bonjour, hi. Candidates Hugh Hewitt on June 8th, Monday, in the year of the plague, 2020. The numbers are, well, they speak for themselves. 1.98 million Americans have had the virus. 112,000 have died. 7 million around the world have had it. Thank you, China. 400,000 have died. I shouldn't say thank you, China. I should say thank you, Chinese Communist Party. They did that to us. But let us focus on the news before us. Over the weekend, Secretary of State, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice took to the airwaves with Margaret Brennan and said this about the demonstrations throughout the week that I believe are now over. We had a great day of demonstrations yesterday, peaceful around the United States. Maybe I saw one estimate total 600,000 people. Maybe it was 1.6 million. Who knows? It was not the massive outpouring, and it was not violent, with the exception of one incident in Seattle. Hats off to everyone involved. Dr. Rice said this to Margaret Brennan, cut number 1.
It certainly is a...
cut number 3.
I would say to those, particularly in places like China and Russia and Iran, who may want to use this for propaganda, let's not be absurd. This is not Tiananmen Square, where you mowed down people who disagreed with the government. This is not the invasion of Crimea, where you took land from your neighbor. This is not the Green Revolution in Iran, where you killed people wantonly because they wouldn't agree with the theocratic government. And I would even say to our friends abroad, in places like Europe, where I'm seeing demonstrations in support of what is happening here, thank you for your support, but please look in the mirror. Please ask yourself, in countries in Europe and countries all across the world, what are you doing about racial and ethnic inequality in your own circumstances? America has gotten better because we have been willing to confront our problems. And we're going to confront our problems again. We're confronting them now, and I think we will move forward this time. But I really don't need to be lectured by Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping about peaceful protest when they have themselves used their own force just because people wanted to criticize the government. That is not what is happening here.
Bravo, Dr. Rice. Give her an award. Bring her, just bravo, Dr. Rice, for making distinctions that need to be made. Bravo, Dr. Rice. Bravo. I could watch it 1,000 times. She is, I believe Mike Pence will be and deserves to be the vice president running mate again. But if Donald Trump wants to win 50 states, he puts Condoleezza Rice, he persuades her to run with him. I don't think that's possible, but he would. And by the way, she declined to jump on the Colin Powell beat up on Donald Trump bandwagon. She said no. She declined to do that because she knows. She may not care for Donald Trump's approach, but he defends the Constitution. The Democrats want to alter it irretrievably. When Colin Powell said that Donald Trump has drifted from the Constitution, Jake Tapper was either unprepared or disinclined to push him on that. It is the Democrats who want to abolish the Electoral College. The Democrats who want to pass laws that oblige electors in the Electoral College not to vote for the people their state want to vote for. It is Democrats who want to expand the Supreme Court, which is not technically unconstitutional, but would be radical. It is Democrats who want to end the Senate filibuster. It is Democrats who radically want to alter the constitutional order via judicial rulings. It's Democrats who are drifted from the Constitution. They're against it. And defunding the police is dramatically how radical has the left gotten in the Democratic Party? Look at the New York Times. Tom Cotton broke the New York Times. Yesterday, the editor of the editorial page resigned because of his woke kids. They have got some 20-somethings running around there who can't read, apparently don't know much about history. It may be the dumbest editorial staff in America. I really do believe if you put them on a Jeopardy set, they wouldn't win around with any other editor because they're all woke. They don't know anything. And they drove out the editorial page editor. Tom Cotton had a couple of choice things to say about the New York Times. He wrote a great editorial, by the way, an op-ed. Tom Cotton said, we can use force under the Insurrection Act. We have used force. It's a last resort, but we will use it if necessary. That was the extent of his op-ed, making obvious points about obvious rights and entitlement constitutional action. They melted down, the woke kids, the 20 and maybe the 30-somethings at the New York Times. Tom Cotton on Fox News, Maria Bartiromo yesterday, cut number 6.
Yeah, I don't remember all the woke staffers at the New York Times rising up in arms whenever they published the Taliban op-ed just a few months ago. It just goes to show you the moral rot inside some of our media and academic institutions, that they don't get outraged about the Taliban, but they do get outraged about conservative opinion.
Moral rot is exactly correct. Constitutional illiteracy is also appropriate. Senator Cotton went on to say to Maria Bartiromo about his op-ed, this, cut number 8.
Hardly, Maria. I will say my op-ed didn't meet the time standards. It far exceeded their standards, which is usually sophomoric left-wing drivel. But here's what happened behind the scenes. Last weekend, we saw rioting, looting, really anarchy and insurrection on our streets. In Washington, D.C., 7 days ago, a famous church was torched, memorials were desecrated, stores were looted. And I said simply last Monday that if the local police are overwhelmed by the numbers of these insurrectionists, if they need support from the National Guard, or if necessary as a last resort, federal troops under the Insurrection Act, and that's exactly what has to happen. Now, fortunately, that's what happened in most places over the course of last week. So what we saw yesterday was people exercising their First Amendment rights to demonstrate and to protest. But in the meantime, we published that exact argument in the New York Times. The New York Times editorial page editor and owner defended it in public statements. But then they totally surrendered to a woke child mob from their own newsroom that apparently gets triggered if they're presented with any opinion contrary to their own, as opposed to telling the woke children in their newsroom, this is the workplace, not a social justice seminar on campus.
Bravo, Senator Cotton, bravo. Meanwhile, Lindsey Graham, also on Fox News, Maria Bartiromo, which is becoming must-watch TV on the weekend. Lindsey Graham says this about Attorney General Bill Barr, from whom you will be hearing a lot during this show. Cut number 9.
I made a request to interview the case agent and the intel analyst, and there were 2 other people who interviewed the subsource for 3 days in January, again in March, and again in May, and they're denying me the ability to do that. I'm going to keep working the system. Attorney General Barr has been the most transparent Attorney General in my lifetime. Grinnell released a lot of information, but why did they run all these stop signs? The question is, did the case agent and the intel agent...
The key is Attorney General Barr has been the most transparent Attorney General in my lifetime. Fact. Attorney General Barr gave a very important interview yesterday on Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan asking him many tough probing questions. He begins by stating this about law enforcement in America. Cut number 14.
I think there's racism in the United States still, but I don't think that the law enforcement system is systemically racist. I understand the distrust, however, of the African American community given the history in this country. I think we have to recognize that for most of our history...
Not fundamentally racist, but he understands the distrust. Then he goes on to make sure that the correct factual record is made. Cut number 15.
Is that accurate?
No, that's completely false. That's completely false. Sunday night...
The president did not demand that?
No, he did not demand that.
What happened?
I came over on Monday morning for a meeting. The night before had been the most violent day, as one of the police
you can
officials.
watch that. I may play that later. Fundamentally false. Listen to this. What was fundamentally false? That Trump ordered the troops into the street. Fundamentally false. This is what I want you to hear about Bill Barr. Little bits taken from what he had to say on Face the Nation yesterday. Cut number 20 about the reporting.
I don't think the Secretary of Defense said he opposed it. I think he said that it was a last resort and he didn't think it was necessary. I think we all agree that it's a last resort, but it's ultimately the president's decision.
Stop right there. Cut number 20. Cut number 20.
I don't think the Secretary of Defense said he opposed it. I think he said that it was a last resort and he didn't think it was necessary. I think we all agree that it's a last resort, but it's ultimately the president's decision. The reporting is completely false on this.
The reporting is completely false. That should just be the clip. Cut number 21.
They were not peaceful protesters, and that's one of the big lies that the media seems to be perpetuating.
3 of my CBS colleagues.
Cut number 22.
Let me get to this, because this has been totally obscured by the media. They broke into the Treasury Department, and they were injuring police.
Cut number 23.
Here's what the media is missing. This was not an operation to respond to that particular
number 24. Cut number 24.
Archbishop Gregory of Washington condemned what happened by gassing peaceful protesters.
There was no gassing. Cut number 25.
Is that accurate?
No, that's completely false. That's completely false. Sunday night.
The president did not demand that?
No, he did not demand that.
Cut number 25.
Is that accurate?
No, that's completely false. That's completely false.
Do you get the picture? 6 times. The media is inaccurate, completely false. Do not buy this garbage. It's run by left-wingers. It's out of control biased. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
The reporting is completely false on. The reporting is completely false on this. The report. The reporting is completely false.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Stand by me right now. I'm going to take so much incoming today. Over at the WashingtonPost.com, my long-form piece on the media, Heal Thyself Before It Is Too Late, has finally posted. It originally posted yesterday online, but not on the landing page. But now it's on the landing page. I'll read it to you next segment. But it will draw the thousands and thousands of views, of course, but it will draw hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of negative comments, because that's what happens. I would just like you to send it everywhere. Type into your Google machine, Hugh Hewitt, Washington Post, or Media Heal Thyself, because it is a throwdown. I have had it with the media. Colin Powell got a pass yesterday. Colin Powell got a complete pass. Every Democrat in the country got a complete pass. Democrats have embraced defund the police. That is a radical, out of the mainstream 1% solution. 1% of America maybe supports that. I don't think the African American community supports that. Radicals support defund the police, and not one Democrat was asked about it. Did you see one Democrat asked about it anywhere? What do you think of defund the police, Joe Biden? What do you think about defund the police? How much? Where? Why? What do you imagine is going to happen when 911 gets called by people facing burglary, assault, rape, murder? Defund the police. It's crazy. And that's what the Democrats are wedded to. And you know what? Even when they begin to run away from it this week, and they will because it is crazy, don't believe them. Because AOC and the squad run the Democratic Party. And if you vote for any Democrat, from Joe Biden to city council, like the Minneapolis City Council, you're voting for anarchy. That party is not committed to the rule of law. You can be against racism, and I am and have been forever, and still respect, salute, admire, and fund the police. It's crazy. Luckily, markets understand that the Republicans are in charge and that the federal judiciary has been restocked by Donald Trump with rule of law judges who understand the Constitution and preserving it. And we're going to have another great day on the market. Now, this market report is brought to you by andrewandtodd.com. I have been telling you for 6 weeks that the interest rates in America are the lowest they have ever been to buy a house, to refinance. They are the lowest they have ever been. But they have risen a little tiny bit over the weekend. You won't notice it in your home mortgages. You only notice it in the 10-year Treasury, which is not the rate you'll get on your home mortgage. That's the rate that drives home mortgages. It is at 0.9% this morning. That's great news. When it's below 1%, people are still saying safety first. I don't trust the economy to grow. I will explain inflation to you tomorrow because inflation is coming. But 0.9% means if you go to andrewandtodd.com, you're going to get the best mortgage rate ever. Buy the home you've always dreamed about now. Refinance right now for the lowest rates ever. andrewandtodd.com are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend money. It's not a brokerage. It's not a call generation, lead generate. No, they're real people. I know Andrew. I know Todd. I've known them for years. They're great lenders. They lend you the money. Or you can call them at 888-888-1172. But here's the environment. The Dow was up 829 points on Friday. The NASDAQ was up almost 200, 198.266 to be specific. And the S&P was up 81.58 points, which is 2.62%. It's going to be a great day, I think, on Wall Street because it's a great day on the Japanese market, which is closed now. It went up at 1.37% after massive gains last week. The rally keeps going because the world is reopening and the coronavirus is less lethal than it was because of treatments, as the Wall Street Journal points out. No vaccine yet, no cure, but better treatments. Everybody's clapping, as are the markets. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
We know this is only temporary. We know it can't go on like this forever. We have to keep focusing on the future and get through this thing day by day. But when it ends, the sun will come out. Jobs will start up again. The traffic jam we used to hate will come back. Thank God for cars. So many things we took for granted are going to be so special. We'll get through this because we have each other. And we have this radio station. We are the answer. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Yeah.
This is a good country. This is a good and decent land. And I believe that with all of my heart. That doesn't mean we can't do a lot better. But it doesn't mean that a sizable percentage of America is bad. Evidently, former Vice President Joe Biden and the Democrat presidential nominee thinks a pretty sizable portion of America is bad. He had a town hall yesterday, another one of these virtual town halls. It feels like every time Biden goes off script, he gets in trouble. Do you believe that up to 15% of Americans are bad people? Is that your view of the nation? If we're going to start categorizing what percentage is good, what percentage is bad, I don't know. That doesn't seem like a winning campaign strategy to me. Here was Joe Biden yesterday. He was with actor Don Cheadle in a virtual town hall.
Do we really think this is as good as we can be as a nation? I don't think the vast majority of people think that. There are probably anywhere from 10 to 15% of the people out there that are just not very good people. But that's not who we are. The vast majority of the people are decent. We have to appeal to that, and we have to unite people, bring them together.
That's a heck of a way to unite, Mr. Biden. That up to 15% of Americans are not very good people. What a unifying message. I guess that goes on a campaign slogan. 15% of Americans are bad? Wow.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
The NFL community and anyone I hurt with my comments yesterday. So who's not included? Friends, teammates, New Orleans, the black community, the NFL community. I guess so someone living outside of New Orleans who isn't black and is not part of the NFL community. Okay. In an attempt to talk about respect, unity, and solidarity centered around the American flag and the national anthem, I made comments that were insensitive. Really. It's not insensitive to kneel during the national anthem. It's insensitive to say it's insensitive to kneel during the national anthem. Do you understand what we have come to? You can thank the New York Times, your colleges and high schools, the rest of the media. That's the world in which we live today. Up is down and down is up. Good is bad and bad is good. I made comments that were insensitive and completely missed the mark on the issues we are facing right now as a country. They lacked awareness and any type of compassion or empathy. Wow. He really had to grovel. To say that it is wrong not to stand during the national anthem is to lack any compassion or empathy. What if the flag were burned? Let's say an NFL player came out and burned the flag. I'd be very curious to know, would that be allowed if a black player did that, or for that matter, a white player in the name of Black Lives Matter burned the American flag at the opening of an NFL game? Would we be allowed to condemn that? Would an NFL player be allowed to condemn that? I would say no.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. A chilling headline ran over Easter weekend from CNN. Louisville police officers to record license plate numbers of Easter weekend churchgoers. Over the course of this pandemic, I've argued that churches should follow generally applicable shelter-in-place orders, that these orders and guidelines do not violate religious liberty. Indeed, we ought to comply with them out of love of neighbor. But if policies single out churches and religious groups, it becomes an entirely different issue, an unconstitutional violation of religious liberty. It's extremely important that all American Christians take note, and in a hurry. I'm Albert Mohler.
The reporting is completely false on this. They were not peaceful protesters, and that's one of the big lies that the media seems to be perpetuating.
3 of my CBS peaceful protests.
Let me get to this, because this has been totally obscured by the media. They broke into the Treasury Department, and they were injuring police. Here's what the media is missing. This was not an operation to respond to that particular crowd. It was an operation to move the perimeter 1 block.
Devout Catholic, Archbishop Gregory of Washington condemned what happened by gassing peaceful protesters.
There was no gassing.
Is that accurate?
No, that's completely false. That's completely false. Sunday night...
The president did not demand that?
No, he did not demand that.
Welcome back, America. I am Hugh Hewitt. What you just heard is William Barr, 6 times in his interview with Margaret Brennan, rightfully smashing the media's narrative. The narrative has nothing to do with the fact. The narrative, which is crafted by woke reporters, producers, editors, hosts, talking heads, is always wrong, is always from the left, is always covering for Democrats. This was the subject of a long piece I have been working on for months, which appeared yesterday on the Washington Post and just appeared on the landing page at the Washington Post right now. I'm going to read it to you. If you go to WashingtonPost.com, you'll see on the right-hand column, Media Heal Thyself Before It Is Too Late. It reads thus: Remember John Chancellor? It's fine if you don't. Very few people from the news media are remembered. Even Walter Cronkite has now faded to a pleasant boomer memory, and a not one very distinct either. I like John Chancellor. After David Brinkley, he was my favorite television broadcaster. Chancellor served as the anchor of NBC Nightly News from 1970 to 1982, moving to the central role on the network after Chet Huntley retired in 1970 and Brinkley graduated to commentator in 1971. Chancellor was, for me, the go-to news guy. I have no idea what his politics were. Chancellor was succeeded by the remarkable Tom Brokaw, then Brian William, and the chair now belongs to Lester Holt. Holt is perhaps the most trusted television anchor in news today. This is an essay I write in today's Post on the collapse of trust in television news, especially cable news. Certainly a percent or two of the 330 million Americans trust a handful of broadcasters with whom they agree. Rush Limbaugh probably has the highest raw number of devoted listeners in the land who really trust him. And he has no one even remotely his equal on television. Radio gifts its proprietors with great dollops of time with which to build this trust. But there are far fewer Americans across the vast political spectrum who trust anyone on television anymore. Anchors, analysts, or reporters, regardless of whether they purport to report or transparently opine. No trust. Zero. Gone. That's a problem. We need a free and fair television press that can be trusted. We will perish as a free republic without it. And we don't have one now. The crisis of American television opinion is not journalism. The crisis of American television journalism is not that the left trust journalists who are obviously from the left, think Rachel Maddow, or that the right trust journalists who are from the right, think Tucker Carlson. Though that is a problem. The exclusive watching of left by left and right by right is a problem. The crisis is that the vast majority of Americans, the vast majority, believe with good reason that all talking heads on television are somewhere on the political spectrum, and that all journalists, producers, and executives standing behind them bend the news to fit their politics. Trust in media has plummeted because most people think of television news when you say media. Journalists of all shapes, sizes, platforms, and personalities are presumed to be advancing an agenda because almost everyone on television is doing so. There are so few neutrals left on TV. For every lesser Holt, I can name 10 who are on Holt-like. What made early television broadcasters so trustworthy? Most of them had been to war, of course. Andy Rooney flew in a B-17 mission, reported from the front. Edward R. Murrow reported from the rooftops during the Blitz. By the way, Cronkite was in the war as well. The 8 million members of the U.S. military who returned from the war to civilian life and their families knew that the newsmen had been in harm's way. There was an earned respect. It endured for a time, and it was passed on to the next generation, Chancellor among that group, and honored by the third generation of news people. It was Brokaw, after all, who coined the term the greatest generation, and who earned the respect of those he obviously respected. There were others. But then it broke. It simply broke. It shattered, actually. Today, there is little to almost no trust in journalism generally because of the descent of television into infotainment. That the byline has become the brand in journalism is true, but it is particularly true for television. It is the host now, or the author, not the network or the paper or the station, that triggers our trust or distrust. Some bylines evoke confidence. Others evince ridicule. Many invoke both. But very few chancellors remain. I don't want to cast stones from my glass house, so I'm not naming anyone in particular who's particularly untrustworthy. I just name people who are trustworthy in this essay. Again, it's on the front page of the Post right now if you go to WashingtonPost.com. I wonder how our collective house might be rebuilt. Since none of us can go to war, how do we get back to trust? From the convulsions of the past 2 decades, beginning with Bill Clinton's impeachment, followed by the Florida recount, 9/11 and war, and successive shocks of technological innovation, and now the events of 2020, can trust ever be reclaimed, especially for televised news? Yes. This is me, opining in the Washington Post. Yes. But starting only from the recognition that a new birth has to occur, with new faces and production teams, new mission statements, new executives who are not themselves casualties of the combat of the past 3 decades. Rome is in ruin, Rome being television news, but it can be rebuilt. How? Go and find the young men and women who have fought wars across the globe for the past 20 years. They are in their 30s and 40s now, as Cronkite, Murrow, and Rooney were when they began their on-air careers. Give them new teams of producers, writers, and editors trained in the not very difficult techniques of television. And it isn't that hard. From places far away from Manhattan and Beltway, Hollywood, and the Silicon Valley. Those are the huge power centers of America, and the new generation should not come from them. Charge these new people with reporting just the news. No opinions whatsoever mixed in. And instant discharge for intermingling with politics. A steel door reinforced with concrete and rebar should forbid the passage from politics to the televised screen. No more former congressional or White House staffers moving seamlessly to anchor chairs or analyst positions. Just the news, please, from people trained in the hard realities of the world. The infotainment complexes don't have to be dissolved. They make a lot of money for many people. They provide comfort food for the extremes of the country. But the hunger for trustworthy news is deep and vast, and it's unfulfilled right now. Someone is going to figure this out. A new brand is going to arise, a new cable news outlet with new faces and of no known politics. This isn't hard to do. It would work. The country needs it. It would be expensive to start, but if begun well and fairly, genuinely objective, ruthless in its extirpation of political bias wherever it appeared, it would flourish and it would eventually turn a profit. No one from the current cable planets of left and right need apply. No one with a degree from journalism school, they are overrun by the left, should apply. The new William Paley, he founded CBS. He started this, television news. The new William Paley will do what the first one did. Find fearless men and women who have been at the front lines of real life and death struggles. Character required. In the near term, President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden can help begin the restoration of television news by handing all of the debates in the fall to C-SPAN, along with a list of acceptable moderators. I've written elsewhere that the model of an arbitration panel can be employed. Trump names one journalist, Biden names another, and those two agree on a third. But that's only necessary if they can't agree on moderators of known fairness, stature, and experience. Holt, John Dickerson of CBS, Dana Bash of CNN. There are others on whom the two candidates might agree. A closing aside, I moderated a panel last summer ago, of 3 conservative personalities before an audience of many hundreds of under 40 influencers among the center-right. There were people from all over the country in the audience. Families are invited to this gathering. It's an annual affair. The room was full. It was like a Catholic mass. The crying and chattering of babies and toddlers filled the background with a pleasant cacophony of normalcy versus the aridity that normally accompanies think tank panels. I asked that panel whom would they trust to moderate the debate, and told them they could not pick a Fox News personality because the Democratic National Committee had banned Fox News from participating in its debates this year and last. So reality would have to be a check on their preferences. Not one of those 3 influencers could name a single member of the news business outside of Fox News whom they would trust. Not one. I expect a parallel gathering of the left's under 40 influencers would have no problem coming up with a dozen names. Thus the divide in the country's politics. Television news, both network and cable, is viewed by activists as occupied territory in the partisan wars in which we are continually engulfed. C-SPAN is not. And as the producer of this fall's debate, it could perhaps find the host, maybe some of the panelists of the background I just detailed above. It would be a first step to ending the crisis of cable infotainment that strikes political life with wrecking balls 24/7. The whole shooting match needs to be supplemented and then supplanted by going back to the future. Go find the next John Chancellor. Start now. He and she are out there. They come in all sizes and shapes, but they have not committed to left or right. Give them a television network worthy of the modifier news. It does not now exist. And no better example exists than yesterday's Bill Barr telling Margaret Brennan repeatedly the news had failed in the last 10 days as it did, or Jake Tapper interviewing Colin Powell and not asking him a serious question after he proclaimed that Donald Trump had departed from the Constitution, when it is the Democrats on the Electoral College, on the expansion of the Supreme Court, on the end of the Senate filibuster, on any number of measures, on the judges they appoint, on their cheering for nationwide injunctions who have departed from the Constitution. The most ludicrous comment I have heard on television in years by Colin Powell, and unobjected to. No follow-up. Go and find my Washington Post editorial. Send it everywhere. It's on the front page of the Post right now. Ignore the comments. The nuts are out. They're like all the New York Times editorial staff that drove the woke kids over at the New York Times that drove out their op-ed editor this weekend. What a crazy time. I'll be back with more afterwards. Don't forget, ReliefFactor.com. We're in the ReliefFactor.com studio. See, you can blend a commercial, which is this is for ReliefFactor.com. It's an endorsement. In fact, I take it every day. I tell you about it 3 times more. It costs $19.95. I talked to my daughter-in-law yesterday. His back was killing her from weeding. I said, are you taking your ReliefFactor.com? I said, I started, but I forgot. I said, take it every day. Every day. You got to get to the levels at which these things work. They support the temporary relief for the minor aches and pains that come with, for example, weeding. Believe me, I take it every day. I'll be thinking about it when I run today. ReliefFactor.com. I'll be right back. 1-800-520-1234. Do you agree with me? The media is broken. I write about it at thewashingtonpost.com. Go send it everywhere.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
So here's the headline, and then I want to read to you the first sentence. New York Times, this is the New York Times headline. New York Times says Senator's op-ed did not meet standards. The subtitle, or the subhead, after a staff uproar, the Times says the editing process was rushed. Senator Tom Cotton's Send in the Troops essay is now under review. I don't even know what does that mean, it's under review. It's an opinion piece. Now listen to the first paragraph, which is a sentence. Executives at the New York Times scrambled on Thursday, that's yesterday, to address the concerns of employees and readers who were angered by the newspaper's publication of an opinion essay by a United States senator calling for the federal government to send the military to suppress protests against police violence in American cities. That's a lie. It's pure 100% lie. The article never, ever hinted at calling for the federal government to suppress protest. It was entirely to suppress violence. There's a big difference. It's a lie. They don't even know when they lie. That's the amazing thing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. A chilling headline ran over Easter weekend from CNN. Louisville police officers to record license plate numbers of Easter weekend churchgoers. Over the course of this pandemic, I've argued that churches should follow generally applicable shelter-in-place orders, that these orders and guidelines do not violate religious liberty. Indeed, we ought to comply with them out of love of neighbor. But if policies single out churches and religious groups, it becomes an entirely different issue, an unconstitutional violation of religious liberty. Over the course of the last several weeks, some government officials have crossed the line. In the case of Louisville, it took a restraining order from United States District Court Judge Justin Walker to curtail Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher's attempt to prevent even drive-in church gatherings. The judge said, quote, "The mayor's decision is stunning, and it is beyond all reason unconstitutional." Consider this. In America, in 2020, comes the threat that they're taking names and they're taking numbers. It's extremely important that all American Christians take note, and in a hurry. I'm Albert Mohler.
ADF, fighting for those whose religion.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for the emails on my Washington Post column. It's up to 300 comments instantly. Don't read the comments. Just send it to people. Just send it far and wide. Because television news is broken. It's a complete catastrophe. And it was so bad over the last 10 days, I don't know what to say. I want to replay for you what Bill Barr said about the television. Just be careful. When he says news, he's referring to cable news. Let's play those in quick order to tell people what I'm talking about.
The reporting is completely false on this. They were not peaceful protesters, and that's one of the big lies that the media seems to be perpetuating.
3 of my CBS peaceful protests.
Let me get to this, because this has been totally obscured by the media. They broke into the Treasury Department, and they were injuring police. Here's what the media is missing. This was not an operation to respond to that particular crowd. It was an operation to move the perimeter 1 block.
Devout Catholic, Archbishop Gregory of Washington condemned what happened by gassing peaceful protesters.
There was no gassing.
Is that accurate?
No, that's completely false. That's completely false. Sunday night...
The president did not demand that?
No, he did not demand that.
It's just full of, and no one noticed this, it's full of what is the generally recognized understanding that the media is unhinged. It just has become completely captured by left-wing wokeness, as has the Democratic Party. Defund the police. Did you see one media person ask one leading Democrat over the weekend, do you believe in defund the police? That's crazy. It's just crazy. And not Joe Biden is hiding in his bunker in his basement. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer would no more be asked that and pressed on it. Colin Powell goes on with Jake Tapper, and no one says, what do you think about defunding the police, General? What do you think about that? And you say President Trump is departing from the Constitution. Isn't it the Democrats who want to abolish the Electoral College in the Senate? Isn't it the Democrats who support crazy left-wing judges? Really? You think he's departing from the Constitution with Kavanaugh and Gorsuch? Just crazy. Hey, let me remind you, tomorrow debuts the Heritage Foundation Hugh for Heritage Hour number 3 tomorrow, bringing you the greatest in Heritage Foundation experts as we try and bring sweet reason to the airwaves with serious policymakers who are also entertaining. You can go to hughforheritage.com, hughforheritage.com. One of the websites I want you to write down. I also want you to write down flattenthefear.com. Flattenthefear.com. Very catchy from our friends at Job Creators Network. Both the Heritage Foundation and Job Creator Network are sponsors of the Hugh Hewitt Show. By the way, the phones are lighting up, 1-800-520-1234. Love to talk to you. 1-800-520-1234. Flattenthefear.com. That's Job Creators Network effort to gather in all of the information from you, your stories about reopening. We need to know how you're going about reopening. A mere 10% of the counties in America accounted for all 95% of the COVID deaths. Are you reopening? How are you doing? The fear of the virus has become a big problem. Now, again, media is broken on this. They do not tell you the real facts, and flattenthefear.com will. A large part of the population can and should go back to living lives without fear. You can also do that while protecting the most vulnerable among us. All right, especially nursing home, especially careful wearing of masks when you are going through crowds and have to transit on mass transit, for example. You can flattenthefear.com. Thanks to Job Creators Network for doing that. I also want to remind you about mypillow.com. One of the people who has kept working throughout, and his people have been wonderful throughout, Mike Lindell. You know, Mike Lindell became something of a folk hero in America, but he still has to sell pillows. And you'll get the best price going if you use my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H. Let's go to the phones. Bracy in Washington State. Hello, Bracy. How are you?
Doing good. Good morning.
Good morning.
Benton County, Washington, which is the Tri-Cities area, Franklin County as well, is in phase 1. And the governor will not allow us to move to phase 2. And they're talking about putting everybody in face masks, face coverings like they did Yakima County. Well, if you're a Second Amendment gun carrier with the permit, concealed weapons permit.
Bracy, stop. We're not going to encourage people to go to rallies to display their weapons. I don't do that. I want people to just get along. In America, it's just go back to normal. All right, everybody's had their demonstrations. Go to work. Go to restaurants. Go out and be normal. But remember that the Democratic Party has put its arms around, it has embraced defund the police. That is their banner, defund the police. That's who they are. They have come out and declared it. They have embraced it. Not one of them stood up to the demand that is a radical demand, defund the police. Bill de Blasio is doing it. The Minneapolis City Council is doing it. Democrat defund the police campaign is their campaign. Defund the police. Unfreaking believable. I'll be back, hour number 3, straight ahead on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Job Creators Network Foundation.
This coming November, you'll have a chance to make a difference. If you vote, you can save this country from the crazies on the left. You know, the ones that want to ruin the economy, turn America into a socialist utopia. Like that'll ever work. But it all starts with one simple act. Make sure you're registered to vote. If you aren't, you're part of the problem. If you vote and you make smart decisions, you'll do more than just make a difference. You'll save the country. We are the answer. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
We've been told for at least 6 weeks now that the only way that we can come out of this in any semblance of getting back to normal is this V-shaped recovery. We have this precipitous voluntary drop because we, as you said, we literally shut down the most powerful economy in the world. And as a result, what we need to see is a concordant and analogous, very, very steep recovery. Don't the figures today indicate that V-shaped recovery, you're the expert, Trish, that V-shaped recovery is in fact possible?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the glimmer of hope, right, that we have right now. And let me tell you, if you can pull that off, Seb, you give people that economic security again, and wow, I mean, he will be applauded for that. If you have the economic security and the physical security, because don't forget, like this is what we're dealing with right now too. You don't have that physical security. If you can give those two things to people, I mean, I think that really affects the middle of the road voter. They want to feel economically and physically secure. So today was a huge win for the president, but more importantly, this is a huge win for America, for every single one of us.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
This is a good country. This is a good and decent land. And I believe that with all of my heart. That doesn't mean we can't do a lot better, but it doesn't mean that a sizable percentage of America is bad. Evidently, former Vice President Joe Biden and the Democrat presidential nominee thinks a pretty sizable portion of America
when you try to log
is
in?
bad. He had a town hall yesterday, another one of these virtual town halls. It feels like every time Biden goes off script, he gets in trouble. Do you believe that up to 15% of Americans are bad people? Is that your view of the nation? If we're going to start categorizing what percentage is good, what percentage is bad, I don't know. That doesn't seem like a winning campaign strategy to me. Here was Joe Biden yesterday. He was with actor Don Cheadle in a virtual town hall.
Do we really think this is as good as we can be as a nation? I don't think the vast majority of people think that. There are probably anywhere from 10 to 15% of the people out there that are just not very good people. But that's not who we are. The vast majority of the people are decent. We have to appeal to that, and we have to unite people, bring them together.
That's a heck of a way to unite, Mr. Biden, that up to 15% of Americans are not very good people. What a unifying message. I guess that goes on a campaign slogan. 15% of Americans are bad? Wow.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Folks, welcome. I'm talking to my friend Dinesh D'Souza. He has a new book out today. It's called United States of Socialism. Who's behind it, why it's evil, how to stop it. Young people seem always to be the easy marks for this kind of, marks, no pun intended, easy marks for this kind of thinking.
That's true. I also think that young people will say the Scandinavian model works, but they don't know what the Scandinavian model is. So the Scandinavian countries, for example, are capitalist in wealth creation. They're socialist in wealth distribution, but they're very careful not to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. And so you have low corporate tax rates, about 20%, same as in America. You have no minimum wage in most Scandinavian countries. They have no wealth tax, no inheritance tax. You can hire and fire people for any reason. Regulations are less than in this country.
Dinesh, I just have to hit pause for a second. Everything you've just said is stunning. I mean, the idea that they have low corporate tax rates, low wealth tax. I mean, you would never dream that in a country that people think of as socialist, that would be the case. Bernie Sanders is not advertising that.
No, and in fact, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren want to impose financial transaction taxes on Wall Street. Now, there's no Scandinavian country that goes near this. The second part of it is they say, look, we can have a generous welfare state, but here's the point. Everybody has to pay for it, not just the rich. We're not going to go after the billionaires. The basic idea is if we have a 50% tax rate and you make $60,000 a year, give us 30. So in other words, they tax the middle class.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube. We know this is only temporary. We know it can't go on like this forever. We have to keep focusing on the future and get through this thing day by day. But when it ends, the sun will come out. Jobs will start up again. The traffic jam we used to hate will come back. Thank God for cars. So many things we took for granted are going to be so special. We'll get through this because we have each other. And we have this radio station. We are the answer.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt on June 8th, 2020, in the year of the plague that now claimed 112,000 American lives. After a weekend of peaceful gatherings across the United States, I'm joined by Bob Costa. Bob is with the Washington Post. Of course, you can follow him on Twitter at Costa Reports. And he is the exception to the rule I described in the Washington Post. It's up on the landing page right now about television news media because every Friday night he hosts Washington Week in Review, which may be the last island of sanity in television news, where I think week in and week out, I can count on an objective assessment of facts. Good morning, Robert. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh.
Tell me who was on your panel Friday night. I was driving and I didn't see it this Friday night.
We had some excellent reporters. Pierre Thomas, the Justice Department correspondent for ABC News, a former Washington Post reporter, Jonathan Martin from the New York Times, Amna Nawaz from PBS NewsHour, and Paula Reed from CBS News, the White House correspondent.
So, Robert, have you had a chance to read my essay on television news, which is over at the Washington Post as we speak on the landing page?
I have, Hugh. I never miss your work.
What do you think of my assessment of the collapse of objectivity in the news?
Well, Hugh, I can only speak for myself, but I would say I'm committed to the values that Gwen Ifill espoused, that Tim Russert espoused, that Marty Barron at the Washington Post advocates for every day, which is journalism with integrity, journalism based on reporting, journalism that's cool-headed and nonpartisan. It's an old-school approach. We do live in turbulent times in both the media and in the political realm. But I believe there's a craving for nonpartisan information that goes in depth. And I can only do what I can do, Hugh, and that's stay steady with those values.
And I believe you do. I actually believe that you are. Let me play for you a handful of comments that Bill Barr made to Margaret Brennan yesterday, who I believe also strives to do what you do, Robert, and hear what he said to her about the reporting on the events of last week. Here's the Bill Barr montage from yesterday's Face the Nation.
The reporting is completely false on this. They were not peaceful protesters, and that's one of the big lies that the media seems to be perpetuating.
3 of my CBS colleagues.
Let me get to this, because this has been totally obscured by the media. They broke into the Treasury Department, and they were injuring police. Here's what the media is missing. This was not an operation to respond to that particular crowd. It was an operation to move the perimeter 1 block.
Devout Catholic Archbishop Gregory of Washington condemned what happened by gassing peaceful protesters.
There was no gassing.
Is that accurate?
No, that's completely false. That's completely false. Sunday night...
The president did not demand that?
No, he did not demand that.
6 times in the course of an interview, Robert Costa, the Attorney General faults the general reporting of the events of last week. I didn't even know that the rioters had broken into the Treasury Department. And by definition, you move from demonstrator to rioter when you trespass that way. 6 times. What do you make of the Attorney General's assessment of the reporting last week?
Well, the Attorney General is a participant in this story. He is not a mere observer. He is someone who was in the vicinity of Lafayette Square when the president made the decision to walk across the square to St. John's Church. And it was originally reported by the Washington Post and others that he was personally involved in some of the logistic decisions. And then he said in the CBS News interview on Sunday that he was not necessarily involved in moving the crowd, that was the responsibility of the Park Police and the Secret Service, because they wanted to make sure they could move the vicinity of the crowd a block to make sure President Trump, as the commander-in-chief, had a safe pathway to the church. And his role is complicated here, and the Post has done a lot of reporting, because he was looking at the crowd. As he said on CBS News, he did observe, in his view, different projectiles and different things being thrown. But based on the Post reporting and many other reports, this was a largely peaceful crowd when the president decided to move over around 7 o'clock on that Monday afternoon.
Bill Barr disputes that, but I want to go to the bigger point. Bill Barr is most definitely a participant in the events of last week. My larger point is, so is the media, especially television news. Dan Rather once famously observed, news is where you look. The news looked last week in places designed to bend the story generally. And I believe every reporter who was there was a participant in that. And indeed, the controversy, as Salena Zito said first hour on this show today, surrounding the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is about journalists as participant. I am afraid that television news has become a participant in the news to an extent it has never been before. What do you make of my general fear, Bob, as I really do believe we're hemorrhaging credibility, by we meaning people who attempt to report news. We are hemorrhaging credibility because we've become participants.
Well, being in a zone of protest does not necessarily make a reporter a participant. The Post local staff has dozens of people, for example, on the scene. And just because you're covering a protest or covering a war, let's say, doesn't mean you support either side in a war or in a protest. You want to have reporters on the ground telling the story of the protesters, also talking to law enforcement to make sure that the reporting is complete. And this is on the issue of race. This has been a challenge for reporters going back decades. And it's not always easy or even the correct way to go about it to just be totally removed. You think about, there's a great book about the Philadelphia Inquirer's former editor, Gene Roberts, called The Race Beat, about civil rights in the 1960s, and how reporters had to cover civil rights in a vigorous way because it was getting no attention. And so sometimes reporters now are passionate about the story, but that does not necessarily mean they're taking a side in the debate. It's a nuanced thing. It's not always done perfectly. But with the issue of race and civil rights, to just be passive at times is a difficult thing to be when the country is changing at such a fast pace.
But here's my warning, Bob. If journalism does not objectively cover race, it will in fact inflame race relations. If it does not objectively cover police reform, it will destroy police reform. If it does not press, for example, Democrats on the ludicrous demand to defund the police, and I did not see, and correct me if you did, and let's pause here, I'll ask you a question. Did you see Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, or any senior Democrat elected official asked to respond to whether or not they support defund the police other than the mayor of Minneapolis this weekend?
I believe Speaker Pelosi was asked about it in recent days, perhaps at her press conference or over the weekend. I saw her comment. This is something I was just talking about earlier today on Morning Joe. Defund the police is a good example where the press can step in and step up. Defund the police is a slogan. It's used in different ways by different people. What exactly does it mean? Some people hear defund the police and they hear defund the entire police force. Others hear that phrase and hear an encouragement for a constructive dialogue about the scope of policing in certain municipalities and cities. And House Democrats who are proposing legislation this week will be challenged repeatedly by reporters and others. Do they support defund the police? But already you see Reverend Sharpton, you see Senator Booker saying we don't want to go as far as eradicating the police, but they defund the police to some leaders in this country on the Democratic side means cutting the budgets of police. And that it means defunding parts of their programs, parts of their militarization that they may have gotten from different federal grants. And so it's a debate that needs to go beyond the slogan, and it's the press's responsibility to help tell that story so it's not just slogan versus slogan in the public dialogue.
Now, Bob, you made a prediction. I predict the press will not step up on this. They will not press on this. I do not know when Nancy Pelosi was asked. What was her answer?
She said House Democrats are focusing on their own legislation, which they're rolling out later Monday, which includes a National Police Oversight Commission and a ban on chokeholds by police officers.
So she skipped. She did not answer. Is that a fair assessment? She did not answer whether she supported defund the police.
She certainly has not endorsed the idea of defund the police. I have not seen anything about that.
But did she was asked, what does it mean? Do you support it? Because what every Democrat in a fair and objective news environment, every Democrat would be asked, do you support defund the police? They would be pressed repeatedly. Do you support defund the police, as happened in Minneapolis? It hasn't happened, Bob, because news is broken. I expect when you get back to it on Washington Week in Review on Friday night, you will press your panel. And unless people answer yes or no, as the mayor of Minneapolis finally said no, they have not been held to account. And media is going to give out passes, but not Bob Costa, not on Washington Week in Review. Stay tuned, America. Thank you, Robert. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Heritage Foundation.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
So here's the headline, and then I want to read to you the first sentence. New York Times, this is the New York Times headline. New York Times says Senator's op-ed did not meet standards. The subtitle, or the subhead, after a staff uproar, the Times says the editing process was rushed. Senator Tom Cotton's Send in the Troops essay is now under review. I don't even know what does that mean, it's under review. It's an opinion piece. Now listen to the first paragraph, which is a sentence. Executives at the New York Times scrambled on Thursday, that's yesterday, to address the concerns of employees and readers who were angered by the newspaper's publication of an opinion essay by a United States senator calling for the federal government to send the military to suppress protests against police violence in American cities. That's a lie. It's pure 100% lie. The article never, ever hinted at calling for the federal government to suppress protest. It was entirely to suppress violence. There's a big difference. It's a lie. They don't even know when they lie. That's the amazing thing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
"22 minutes after the America, the police are still standing. The Constitution is still standing because peaceful demonstrations never threaten the rule of law. Defund the police threatens the rule of law, and Democrats have put their arms around defund the police. Joe Biden is the defund the police candidate, and Joe Biden will have to answer. Defund the police? Joe, didn't you pass the oppressive Criminal Justice Act that threw so many tens of thousands of people into jail? How much does Joe Biden get to forget that he opposed the ending of busing? How much does he, Joe Biden supported busing. No, Joe Biden was against busing. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got that wrong. Joe Biden has been on each side of every issue at some point in his incoherent career, but he has not yet said, no, I'm against defunding the police. Democrats own it. You know, number one story on the rundown this morning, which is posted at my YouTube channel. And you should subscribe to that because I put up only 3 or 4 things a day, the very best of the show. You don't have to listen to the whole show to hit the highlights, right? Everything is a bell curve. Most of my show is just great, but some of it is beyond superb. And that some of it I post in 3 or 4 segments every day at YouTube. So if you missed the show, subscribe to YouTube, you'll get it. This morning you'll get the rundown. You will get my interview with Mike Allen. And you will get my monologue about my Washington Post essay on television news, which is generating, the left doesn't like it when they're called out. It's just the case. But you can still read it. Hadn't been banned yet from the Washington Post. The Washington Post is not crazy like the New York Times. The New York Times is completely woke and poisoned. It is. Tom Cotton broke the New York Times. He broke it. They had an insurrection in the newsroom by their woke kiddos. The recent J-School graduates showed up, and they drove out the esteemed editor of their op-ed page, Mr. Bennett, because they ran a United States Senator perfectly normal column saying, as a last resort, troops will be used. And that is, by the way, the truth. As a last resort, troops are used under the Insurrection Act and have been in the history of the country. But the woke folk drove them out. 1-800-520-1234. And news will not cover this. That's the point of my Washington Post piece. Let me check markets for you because AndrewandTodd.com sponsor this program. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. You can reach them at AndrewandTodd.com. Lowest mortgage rates in history. Refinance. If you're a senior citizen who's on a tough budget, get a reverse mortgage now. If you want to buy a second home or an investment property, do it now. The 10-year Treasury is at 0.9% this morning. 0.9%, the lowest interest rates in history. If you can get into line and get it done, AndrewandTodd.com will do it for you. The market on Friday went up 829 points. NASDAQ went up just under 200. The S&P, 81.5 points. And they're going to have another great day today. But you won't be there. You will not take advantage of these rates unless you get into line. Call Andrew and Todd, 888-888-1172. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it's Rudy. Good morning, Rudy. Hey, Rudy.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Am I on the air now? Okay.
Yes, you are, Rudy. You got to hang up the radio. Steelers fans.
I think.
Are you a Steelers fan, Rudy?
Certainly.
I knew it. Go ahead.
The only way you become a Steelers fan is you watch how they beat the Browns.
But Rudy, whenever someone is listening to the radio, when I try and bring them on, I just know they're a Steelers fan. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's because of my Polish background. We're slow.
That's not true. That's not true. I know many people. I'm from Warren. Ski was part of the landscape. You've missed your shot, Rudy, which is like the Steelers. You got 20 seconds left. Hurry.
All right. I think the SDS and the weathermen have got their projects, their things operating. And I think their goal was to start race wars. And I think right now that Obama and Bill Ayers are doing high fives.
Well, Rudy, you're right about the SDS. I don't think Ayers and Obama, the president, mix it up much anymore. Stay tuned. They used to.
We know this is only temporary. We know it can't go on like this forever. We have to keep focusing on the future and get through this thing day by day. But when it ends, the sun will come out. Jobs will start up again. The traffic jam we used to hate will come back. Thank God for cars. So many things we took for granted are going to be so special. We'll get through this because we have each other and we have this radio station. We are the answer. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
How can these people out there in the streets not know, according to the CDC, that police killings of blacks have dramatically declined over the last 45 years by almost 75%? How can you not know that? How can you not know of a peer-reviewed study in a publication put out by the National Association of Sciences in which every single police shooting in the year 2015 was examined, and they could not find any evidence whatsoever of disproportionate deadly force used against blacks? And then, of course, there's a smaller study by the Harvard economist I told you about. Not only did he not find that they used disproportionate deadly force against blacks, but that they were more hesitant, more reluctant to use deadly force against blacks than against whites. More whites are murdered by blacks than blacks are murdered by whites. How can you not know that? Now, again, as I said many times, most murder is same-race murder. But to the extent that there are interracial black-white homicides every year, about 750, how can you not know that blacks kill 500 whites, even though blacks are 13% of the population, and whites kill 250 blacks, even though they're around 61% of the population? How can you not know that? And you're out in the streets making all these assertions. What you're doing is making things worse. You're creating an image of the police department that's going to make people not want to join it, and you're causing the so-called Ferguson effect.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
We've been told for at least 6 weeks now that the only way that we can come out of this in any semblance of getting back to normal is this V-shaped recovery. We have this precipitous voluntary drop because we, as you said, we literally shut down the most powerful economy in the world. And as a result, what we need to see is a concordant and analogous, very, very steep recovery. Don't the figures today indicate that V-shaped recovery, you're the expert, Trish, that V-shaped recovery is in fact possible?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the glimmer of hope, right, that we have right now. And let me tell you, if you can pull that off, Seb, you give people that economic security again, and wow, I mean, he will be applauded for that. If you have the economic security and the physical security, because don't forget, like this is what we're dealing with right now too. You don't have that physical security. If you can give those two things to people, I mean, I think that really affects the middle of the road voter. They want to feel economically and physically secure. So today was a huge win for the president, but more importantly, this is a huge win for America.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The U.S.-based company Surgisphere, whose handful of employees appear to include a science fiction writer and an adult content model, provided data from multiple studies on COVID-19 co-authored by its chief executive, so far has failed to adequately explain its data or methodology. Harsani points out partisans have been rooting against hydroxychloroquine for months now. There's really no other way to describe the manic reaction to a drug that has been widely, though anecdotally, said to have therapeutic value against coronavirus. Politicians have blocked attempts to study the drug. The number of shoddy pieces of journalism surrounding hydroxychloroquine, he writes, is just remarkable. A couple of weeks ago, Biden compared taking hydroxychloroquine to drinking bleach, even though millions of Americans take hydroxychloroquine every day to survive. Well, now we know, according to National Review, that thousands of hospitals around the world relied on Surgisphere data to make determinations about treatment and studies. The World Health Organization, the organization I'm assured we must continue funding, halted clinical trial for the delays.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. It's 33 minutes after the hour. I had a Pleasant Valley Sunday yesterday. Washington, D.C. did generally. On Saturday and Sunday, it was more like a giant block party. I saw Governor Romney, now Senator Romney, marching yesterday. President Trump just tweeted out criticism of that. I'm glad to see Senator Romney marching. I am. His father did it in Detroit during the race unrest then. It's a noble thing. I want Americans of all colors and all backgrounds and all religions to get along. Generally, we do. And I believe we will continue to improve in that relation. But to fund the police is nuts. And no one pressed anyone about that. In fact, I've worked with Jake Tapper. I respect his abilities a great deal. We used to be quite friendly. We are not now, sadly, but we used to be quite friendly. And Jake yesterday interviewed General Powell, and I have enormous respect for General Powell. Great statesman, wonderful soldier. But he said an extraordinary thing. I had to check the transcript, and Jake did not press him on it. It's like not talking about it. Said the president is drifting from the Constitution. That is wrong. That is incorrect. The Democratic Party has cast off from the Constitution. They are motoring away from it in rapid fashion, not just to fund the police stuff. The police power is inherent at the state level in every government. And the Insurrection Act was passed by the Congress and signed by the president, has been employed by presidents in the past, perfectly constitutional. It is the Democratic Party which has given up on the Constitution. And Jake, had he been prepared, ought to have come back and said, what do you mean drifting away from the Constitution? What about the effort to end the Electoral College? Is that not a direct strike at the idea of a republic that is representative, not democratic? What about the idea of faithless electors being demanded by state laws supported by Democrats to vote for the popular vote winner? Is that not unconstitutional? What about judges issuing national injunctions from their district court offices? What about abolishing the Senate? What about abolishing the filibuster in the Senate? Are those not contrary to the traditions and mores of the United States, General Powell? Instead, he got no hard questions. None. And so my essay in the Washington Post today is particularly appropriate. Media, heal thyself. And on the question of what did the media do about the racial demonstrations or the demonstrations on behalf of police reform, a good job yesterday because they were peaceful. They did a horrible job the week before, especially on the president's call to the governor's speech and walk to the St. John's Church front on Monday. Attorney General William Barr, let's play the short version in his interview with Margaret Brennan, slamming the media coverage of last week.
The reporting is completely false on this. They were not peaceful protesters, and that's one of the big lies that the media seems to be perpetuating.
3 of my CBS colleagues.
Let me get to this, because this has been totally obscured by the media. They broke into the Treasury Department, and they were injuring police. Here's what the media is missing. This was not an operation to respond to that particular crowd. It was an operation to move the perimeter 1 block.
Devout Catholic Archbishop Gregory of Washington condemned what happened by gassing peaceful protesters.
There was no gassing.
Is that accurate?
No, that's completely false. That's completely false. Sunday night...
The president did not demand that?
No, he did not demand that.
I'm telling you, the collapse of television news on this is total. Total. Have you yet seen a story on any of the law enforcement officers who were murdered or injured in the course of the last week and a half? Defund the police. Unbelievable. So I have an essay over at the Washington Post, which I encourage you to send to all of your friends. Media Heal Thyself. It's on the landing page right now. Media Heal Thyself. It's in the upper right-hand corner. It's got hundreds of comments already. And interestingly enough, as I scan through them, normally I don't touch them, but I believe I've hit a chord here. And because some of the comments are supportive, it's the first time ever. Normally when I joke about comments, it's because they're all full of the nuts who go there to comment. But some of yeah, you're right. Television news is broken. Television news is badly broken. About defunding the police, let's talk to Brian in Las Vegas. Hello, Brian. Welcome to the program.
I see nobody asking, where did this term come from? It comes from the pages of Black Lives Matter Global, their website. It's been there for years. And so now we have the media, left-leaning media, and the Democrat Party mainstreaming the aims of a subversive militant group funded to overthrow our constitutional form of government.
Well, Brian, I don't know much about Black Lives Matter, but I know defund the police is radical, like you say, and it has gone everywhere. And not one Democrat has been asked. So when I asked Bob Costa about it, he said Nancy Pelosi was asked, and I asked him, I didn't see her ask. What did she say? She didn't answer the question. This is the question of the hour. And we have now gone 96 hours since it surfaced as a demand. Not one Democrat anywhere has been pressed on this. It's insane. It's not even remotely close to the margins of acceptable political discourse. And because the media knows that, they are giving a collective pass to Democratic politicians. Agree or disagree, Brian?
Agree. And we have the mayor of D.C. painting it on the roadway.
A Democratic mayor of D.C. painting Black Lives Matters equals defund the police. Thank you, Brian. Let me go to Louisville, Kentucky. Lawrence, what do you think?
Well, there was a needless death of Taylor because of a botched police raid in Louisville, Kentucky a while ago. But what nobody's mentioning was that the mayor has been defunding the Louisville Police Department, and he's a Democratic mayor, and he wanted a tax increase, and he didn't get a tax increase, and instead of cutting his pet projects he has, and that's why we didn't vote for a tax increase, he has so many damn pet projects, he's been cutting back the payroll and retiring.
Eric Garcetti announced over the weekend, I believe it was Eric Garcetti, 10% cut to the police. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. Thank you, friend. Bill in New Orleans. We'll go down south. Bill, what say you?
Morning glory, Hugh.
Evening grace.
I haven't spoken to you since you were on in the afternoon.
Oh, good. So you're up early this morning. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you harping on the brokenness of the media, but I think if you add the word corrupt, you'll be even more accurate.
Well, I don't know anyone who takes payola. I don't know anyone who takes payola. By the way, the President of the United States has tweeted. All in caps, law and order, not defund and abolish the police. Then not in caps, the radical left Democrats have gone crazy. I am retweeting this. He's right. The president is right. Joe in Fredericksburg, Texas. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. Your interview with Bob Costa got me to thinking. It seems like the media, the reporters cannot see anything that has to do with police and race in terms of other than Bull Connor. And I wonder if that's because back then it really was black and white, good and evil. And it's just so much easier for them if they can.
No, by the way, there are a lot of great police reporters in the country who understand policing, and they do a good job, and they know this is nonsense. But they're not getting any airtime right now. Right now, I'm mostly when I talk about news, I'm talking about television news. There's no drama, zero drama, in going to a city where the police department is loved and embraced. There is zero drama in going to a sporting event where there are cops lining the field. There's zero drama. You take the cops out of stadiums. I wish somebody would ask these athletes, do you want the police? Do you want security on the sidelines when you play? Do you want police outside in the cordoned off area where you walk into the stadium? Do you or don't you? Because if you don't want them, we'll be happy to pull them out. They're expensive. They get time and a half or 2 times. We'll be happy to get rid of them. You'll never hear an athlete saying that. They love the police. We're caught in this binary thing. It is okay to be against police violence. It's okay to say that George Floyd was, in my opinion, murdered. And that man has to be prosecuted, as should everyone who murders someone. It is nuts to say defunding the police. Bill in Sarasota, Florida. What do you say, Bill?
Morning, Gloria. Hey, you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, saw you in Tampa. Love the show.
We had a great event down there. Great station.
It absolutely was. I picked up Dennis Prager's second book.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Bible down there.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I had to rub it in a little bit. Hey, I've got an observation here. The origins of the defund the police thing. Think about who benefits from this. Who takes over the job? Neighborhood gangs. Just as an example, England let Muslim neighborhoods be self-governing, and they instituted Sharia law.
Bill, that's not going to happen because we're not going to defund the police, and that wouldn't happen. I know, but thanks. I don't go there. That's off the map a little bit. It's off the map a lot. That's not what the issue is. The issue is that we're not defunding the police, and Democrats won't say that because their hardcore left, which owns the party, wants it. Art in Oregon. Art, go ahead.
Morning, Hugh. Agree with you 100%. In fact, in Washington and Oregon, they're talking and will probably try to institute taking the police out of the schools as liaisons. That is going to create a worse problem, Hugh, and that's what the Democrats want. They want to make the police look like villains, and it's wrong, and we have to hold these people accountable for making the problem worse, not better.
Do you know at Stoneman Douglas High School, when the horrible shooting occurred at Parkland, February 14th, 2018, that was because the school resource officer failed in his job. Do people understand that? That the next time, and there will be a next time, sadly, in modern America, there will be another school shooting. You know who will stop that? Either a brave teacher or bystander with a gun, or the police, and it's usually the police. And if you defund the police, there will be no stopping it in most occasions. It's nuts. It's crazy. Alan in Pennsylvania, St. Pete's, Florida. Hi, Alan.
Hey, good morning, Hugh. Yeah, they should defund the police. They should defund all the security details for all the Democrats that are running around saying defund the police. Let's see how they like it.
Oh, you know what? It's just absolutely the most hypocritical thing in the world, and not one of them has been asked yet. Understand that the media are an arm of the Democratic Party, and by that I mean television news. And that's why I wrote the piece for the Washington Post. I've been working on it for 9 months, by the way. It just happened to get finished this weekend with my editor. We just happened to run it, but it could not be more timely. Thank you, my friend. 1-800-520-1234. ReliefFactor.com, going out for, I don't know what the temperature is in the Beltway by the time I'm done, and sunscreen on and out limbering up, but ReliefFactor.com will make it possible to get through it. ReliefFactor, got my Gatorade going right now, getting hydrated, ready to go, and my ReliefFactor.com. Take it in the first hour, remind you 2 more times. Take it every day, $19.95, get you started, see if it works for you. I said to my daughter-in-law yesterday, are you using it? Because her back is killing her. She was weeding. I said, no, you got to use it every day. Got to use it every day. She said, I started and I forgot. I said, nope, 3 weeks. Take it every day. Let me also tell you about Honor Bound Coffee. Honor Bound Coffee. If you go and get your coffee from honorboundcoffee.com, every cup of coffee you have, every penny you spend, the profit from it, that which is that left over after they've made it and sent it out to you, that goes to military families when you get your coffee from honorboundcoffee.com. Tim Alberta of Politico Magazine is up next, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Job Creators Network Foundation.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
So here's the headline, and then I want to read to you the first sentence. New York Times, this is the New York Times headline. New York Times says Senator's op-ed did not meet standards. The subtitle, or the subhead, After a staff uproar, the Times says the editing process was rushed. Senator Tom Cotton's Send in the Troops essay is now under review. I don't even know what does that mean, it's under review. It's an opinion piece. Now listen to the first paragraph, which is a sentence. Executives at the New York Times scrambled on Thursday, that's yesterday, to address the concerns of employees and readers who were angered by the newspaper's publication of an opinion essay by a United States senator calling for the federal government to send the military to suppress protests against police violence in American cities. That's a lie. It's pure 100% lie. The article never, ever hinted at calling for the federal government to suppress protest. It was entirely to suppress violence. There's a big difference. It's a lie. They don't even know when they lie. That's the amazing thing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Final segment of today's show on the first Monday of a new America. I believe these demonstrations have changed America, especially the demand to defund the police. And I have an essay over at the Washington Post, Media Heal Thyself. One of the people I would put onto my new cable station if I was king of the forest, not queen, not duke, not earl, would be Tim Alberta of Politico Magazine, because I think Tim is actually a great objective reporter, and I don't know his politics, and there aren't that many people out there. Tim Alberta, good morning. Did you spend the weekend in Michigan, or were you inside the Beltway?
Oh, Hugh, come on. You know the answer to that. I was cutting grass and enjoying the great outdoors and far, far removed from that little insular universe.
So tell me I don't know if you've had a chance to read my essay in the Washington Post yet. Do you think that news can be salvaged on TV, or are we polarized forever?
No, I think we're polarized forever. To give you the short answer, I have argued for years now, Hugh, that whether you're talking about congressional politics, whether you're talking about socioeconomic and geographic clustering in the electorate, whether you're talking about media, we are permanently bifurcated. I don't see any of this getting any bit better or returning to whatever normal once meant.
Okay, in that light of that, the demand to defund the police has become part of the Democratic platform. When the mayor of Washington, D.C., the Democratic mayor, wrote Black Lives Matter equals defund the police, and not one Democrat rejected that out loud, Nancy Pelosi, Bob Costa tells me, sidestepped the question. I think it became part of the Democratic platform. I think Joe Biden owns it. What is the effect of defund the police on the election, Tim Alberta?
Well, we're going to see. Obviously, Biden will have ample opportunity, Hugh, to speak to this question directly, and at that point, I'll be willing to make a judgment on whether he's owning it or what he's doing about it. I also think that if he picks a running mate who has a history in law enforcement, be it Val Demings, be it Kamala Harris, what they have to say on the issue will also be quite significant. So I'm not quite ready at all to say that it's part of the Democratic platform, but I do think it presents, a real challenge for the party to try and straddle the sort of progressive base, which is up in arms, and justifiably so, about yet another case of police brutality, and at the same time try and communicate to the center of the electorate that the party is not going to be taking extremes in response to George Floyd or any number of these other instances.
Now, Tim, part of the demonstrations have been around the idea that silence is consent. Silence is complicity. Defund the police is the centerpiece of the demonstrations. No Democrat except the mayor of Minneapolis, because he was confronted and quite bravely, in my opinion, said, no, I do not buy that, answered that. I believe their silence is consent. Their silence means they agree, and I don't believe they get a free pass. You can't say something as radical as defund the police and not either agree or disagree with it, like the president did this morning in a tweet saying explicitly that's radical and it's nuts.
Well, so a couple of things, Hugh. First, I'm not at all convinced that defund the police is the central component to these protests and these demonstrations that have been sweeping across the country with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people participating. Really, defund the police is a phrase that's like 96 hours old at this point. So I'm not entirely sure I agree with you on that point. And then I think secondly, I have a magazine piece up this morning sort of examining how on the one side of this, you're going to have a real fracture, a real schism exposed on the Republican side as far as the old school law and order politics. And it really revolves around this question of, are we even willing to acknowledge that there is systemic racism in criminal justice? And on the other side now,
Stop. Wait. I don't believe that. I don't believe there's systemic. Did you say whether we are going to agree? That's not a matter of agreement, Tim. I hope you did not presume that, because that's not true.
No, I said whether or not Republicans will acknowledge that there is systemic racism in criminal justice.
But that makes it sound like you believe it's a matter of fact that you don't. Do you have an opinion on that?
I don't have an opinion, Hugh. What I'm saying is that is, on the Sunday shows yesterday, you heard multiple administration officials ask about this, and you now have Republicans. George W. Bush used the phrase systemic racism the other day in his statement, and that set off its own little brush fire on the right. And my point is that there are some Republicans now who are going to acknowledge that systemic racism exists. There are others who are going to go to their grave denying that it exists. And
it's not go to our grave. It just doesn't exist. Systemic racism, the definition of it is everywhere at all times, every police department has racists in it. That is not true. I think I have to go read your piece, Tim, and I will. But the real question is defund the police. And when the mayor of D.C. puts Black Lives Matter equals defund the police, does that not lay down that as the marker? I think you're focused on the wrong question, though you may come to it. But does that not mean that Democrats have to confront that question, Tim Alberta?
Yeah, they do. And that's exactly the point I was making, Hugh, is that you now have both party bases that are going to be sort of facing internal schisms over these questions, and whether the establishment of the party acts differently moving forward is I think, a foundationally important question.
Interesting. I don't agree that the Republicans face that. I don't believe you'll find anyone actually asserting that systemic racism is in the police departments of America. I don't think George W. Bush said that, but I'll check on it.